We begin with Virginia Satir. She is recognized as one of the founders of family therapy, but her true clinical contribution is that she was deeply trauma-informed, decades before the term entered the psychological lexicon. Early psychological practice relied on a traditional threat-reward model, diagnosing pathology and punishing rule-breaking within a strict hierarchy. Satir proposed an additive alternative, the organic seed model. The clinician's goal is to build health within the system, replacing the focus on excising illness. In this seed model, what a traditional therapist might diagnose as dysfunctional behavior is reframed. It is viewed as a survival mechanism designed to shield a blocked inner life force from external threats. Our role as clinicians is not to judge the dysfunction. Our objective is to deploy experiential tools that unblock that life force, allowing the family system's natural drive toward health to take over. To understand why this requires a specific toolkit, we have to look at pseudo-mutuality. This occurs when families suppress conflict just to survive, maintaining a surface-level peace without ever resolving their underlying emotional reality. Relying strictly on intellectualized talk therapy often inadvertently protects this pseudo-mutuality. Clients are highly adept at rationalizing their behavior to keep the peace. These verbal defenses are specifically engineered to maintain the family status quo. If a clinician engages purely on a verbal level, they get trapped in a stagnant analytical loop, governed by the client's defense mechanisms. To achieve true second-order change, we must bypass the intellect. We have to completely break the verbal loop. Clinicians must learn to map nonverbal internal distress and intervene physically. This is how we break a systemic deadlock. This brings us to the atomic level of family therapy, the calculus of congruence. Under stress, individuals protect their self-worth using highly specific coping mechanisms. This diagram maps the three relational variables: self, other, and context. The coping stances are not inherent personality traits. They are survival strategies built by manipulating these three variables. Notice what happens in the placating stance. The individual appeases and mediates to avoid rejection. They honor the other and the context, but they erase their own feelings, expending massive amounts of emotional energy in the process. In the blaming stance, the other is discounted. The client masks deep internal vulnerability and loneliness through dictatorial control and constant fault-finding. The super-reasonable stance leaves only context. The individual relies purely on cold logic, stripping away all human emotion to distance themselves from their own fear. Finally, the irrelevant stance. Often adopted by children, this involves using chaotic distraction to deflect from the rising emotional tension in the room. Self, other, and context are all ignored. The ultimate therapeutic goal is shown here: congruence, or the leveler stance. In this state, an individual's internal emotional reality and their external expression perfectly match across all three variables. Systemic healing is impossible as long as a family is locked in survival stances. Effective therapy requires actively guiding clients out of these coping mechanisms and into congruent communication. These incongruent survival stances do not operate in a vacuum. They feed off one another dynamically, creating an interlocking system of dysfunction. To understand the architecture of a family, we have to scale up from the individual and look at therapeutic triads. This diagram contrasts two distinct perspectives on triads. Murray Bowen viewed triads through the lens of tension displacement, two people deflecting their conflict onto a third party. Satir, shown on the right, viewed the triad as a foundational learning system. Satir defined the primary triad, mother, father, and child, as the foundational learning system where the identity of the self is first constructed. When parents engage in conflict, perhaps one operating as a blamer and the other as a placater, the child unconsciously absorbs that tension. To survive the emotional spike, the child often adopts the irrelevant stance to distract the system. Treating that child as an isolated, identified patient fails because the behavior is a symptom of the environment. The entire primary triad is functioning as a closed, unhealed learning system. To break that closed learning system, the clinician has to stop relying on dialogue and introduce physical movement. Take a look at this representation of family sculpting. This intervention bypasses intellectualization by mapping emotional isolation and enmeshment directly onto physical space. In the clinical setting, bodies are positioned to reflect the invisible hierarchy. One family member might be instructed to kneel, representing the placating stance, while another looms overhead to represent blaming. This physical manifestation forces the family to confront their true dynamics visually and somatically. Words can be manipulated, but physical posture strips away verbal defenses. The therapist then actively alters the sculpture. By repositioning these bodies into new, congruent formations, clients physically feel what a balanced interaction requires. By moving the sculpture, the family lives and breathes a new reality in the present moment. This experiential shift is what moves them out of a closed system and into an open one. A client's immediate family dynamics are frequently dictated by unwritten rules inherited from previous generations. This academic text outlines family reconstruction. Note how it utilizes family maps and chronologies. This is the macroscopic multi-generational expansion of family sculpting. Clients carry the coping mechanisms, the hidden expectations, and unresolved traumas of their parents and grandparents. Reconstruction involves an experiential process of role-playing that multi-generational drama. It takes internal, historical processes and externalizes them in the room. Witnessing and physically enacting this history gives the primary client the perspective required to finally unlearn obsolete survival messages. True systemic freedom requires reconciling current interactions while actively updating the historical map that governs them. The kinetic, present-moment nature of sculpting and reconstruction frequently induces a flow state in the clinical setting. By engaging the body in new configurations, we introduce sensory-motor inputs that challenge established mental maps. This kinetic experience allows the nervous system to establish more flexible pathways for interaction, moving past the rigid circuits of the past. But executing this requires a specific orientation from the clinician. Satir referred to this as the use of self in therapy. You cannot act as a detached, objective observer. As therapists, you have to model extreme congruence yourselves. The therapist must bring their own spiritual life force into the room. You are responsible for creating a container of extreme vulnerability and trust, a container secure enough to give the family permission to change. The core shift required of modern therapists is abandoning the need to play judge or to compel a client's conformity to a rigid standard. Observe this diagram of Satir's mandala of self. It represents the ultimate goal for the individual, requiring the perfect balance of the physical, intellectual, emotional, sensual, and spiritual facets. The clinician's true job is to uncover that underlying life force, honoring the inherent value and equivalence of every family member. Before our next discussion, I want you to critically examine your own survival stances. Consider how your personal incongruence might stall a clinical session. When a therapist applies the SEED model, they move beyond symptom management to foster an ecosystem where every individual's inherent value drives the growth of the whole.